a fig leaf, an animal skin, and a golden plate engraved with the name of God. 3 coverings, 3 moments in the Bible, and a thread that connects them, running from the first pages of Genesis all the way to the last pages of Revelation. Most people read Genesis 3 as the story of a man, a woman, and a piece of fruit. But there's something hiding in this chapter that changes everything, and almost nobody talks about it. Let's set the scene. Genesis has just told us something extraordinary about humanity. The man, Adam in Hebrew, isn't just a person placed in a garden. The language of Genesis describes him as a king. The garden isn't a wilderness. The Hebrew word suggests an enclosed royal park, the kind of space where a king would hold court. Adam is given dominion over the animals. He names them, and in the ancient Near East, naming something meant you had authority over it. Kings named conquered territories. Parents named children. To name was to rule. So picture this, a king in his royal garden, crowned with glory and honor, walking with God in the cool of the day, given authority over every living thing. That's where the story begins. And then something goes terribly wrong. And Genesis doesn't stop there. Psalm 8 looks back at this moment and says, God crowned humanity with glory and honor and put all things under their feet. That's throne room language, royal language. Here's the part everyone knows. The serpent, the fruit, the disobedience. Adam and Eve eat from the tree they were told not to touch, and suddenly, the text says, they knew they were naked. Their first response? They sew fig leaves together to cover themselves. Now most of us move quickly past this detail. Fig leaves, a bit embarrassing, a bit funny, and then God shows up and sorts it out. But pay attention to what happens next, because the Bible is doing something remarkable here. Genesis 3:21. The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Pause on that. God replaces their fig leaf coverings, the ones they made themselves, with animal skins. Why? What's the difference? Here's where it gets interesting. The fig leaves were Adam and Eve's attempt to fix the problem themselves. Human effort, a quick patch job. But God doesn't accept the patch job. He provides something different, and that something required the death of an animal. This is the first bloodshed in the Bible, not in a battle, not as punishment, as a covering, and it sets up a pattern that echoes through every book that follows. But there's a deeper layer here that most people miss entirely. Think about what's happened to Adam. He was a king, placed in authority over all living things. And what did he do? He submitted to a creature he was supposed to rule. The serpent, whatever we understand it to be, was one of the animals under Adam's authority, and instead of exercising that authority, he handed it away. Here's the theological weight of that moment. When a king submits to a beast, he becomes less than what he was made to be. He descends. The one who was supposed to rule the animals is now clothed in animal skins. The covering isn't just mercy, it's a marker of what humanity has become. A king dressed as the very thing he was meant to rule over. And the Bible traces this pattern again and again, so consistently that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Fast forward to Daniel chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar, and this is striking, is actually called King of Kings in the Bible. Not as a figure of speech, he literally held that title. He was the most powerful human being on earth, and what happens to him? The text says he looked out over Babylon and declared, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" And while the words were still on his lips, he was driven from his throne. He lived in the wild. He ate grass like cattle. His hair grew like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. A king, the King of Kings, reduced to an animal, living among beasts, looking like a beast. The most powerful man alive, less than human. It's the same pattern as Eden. When a ruler grasps beyond his God-given place, when he tries to claim glory that belongs to God alone, he doesn't ascend. He falls. He becomes less than he was, not more. And here's the part that matters. Nebuchadnezzar only returns to his humanity when he lifts his eyes to heaven and acknowledges that the Most High rules. God restores him. Just like in the garden, God is always the one who provides the way back. Now you might be thinking, is this just a coincidence? Two stories that happen to rhyme. But then look at Daniel chapter 7. Daniel has a vision of 4 great kingdoms, and how does the Bible represent them? Not as kings, not as thrones, as beasts, a lion, a bear, a leopard, a terrifying 4th creature. Every human empire that forgets its place before God is symbolized the same way, as an animal. The pattern is baked into how the Bible thinks about power, and it doesn't stop in Daniel. Think about Pharaoh in Exodus. Here's another king who claims divine authority. The Egyptians literally worshipped their Pharaoh as a god on earth. And what does God do? He dismantles Pharaoh's power through plagues that target the very animals and natural forces Egypt deified. The Nile, sacred to Hapi, turns to blood. Frogs, insects, livestock. The created order itself rises against the king who claimed to be above it. And at the end, Pharaoh's army is swallowed by the sea, the same chaotic waters that Genesis 1 tells us God had already tamed. A king who claimed to be a god, consumed by creation itself. Every time a ruler tries to climb above his station, the Bible shows the same thing happening. He doesn't become more. He becomes less. He becomes a beast, or the beasts become his undoing. But we're not done, because there's a mark involved too, and this is where it gets really fascinating. Go back to Genesis 3:19. God tells Adam, "By the sweat of your brow you will eat your bread." That sweat on his forehead becomes a mark, a visible sign of the curse, of the fall from kingship. And just 1 chapter later, Cain receives a mark too, placed on him by God, a sign of both judgment and protection. The marks accumulate. Humanity carries them forward. Now jump to Exodus 28. God is establishing the priesthood, and he tells Moses to make a gold plate engraved with the words, "Holy to the Lord," and fasten it to the front of the high priest's turban, right on his forehead. A golden inscription covering exactly the place where Adam bore the mark of sweat. Do you see what's happening? God is reversing Eden, 1 step at a time. The priest stands in for humanity, and the mark of the curse is covered by the name of God. Where there was sweat, now there is gold. Where there was a curse, now there is holiness. And then, in the final pages of the Bible, the reversal is complete. Revelation 22:4 says this about God's people in the restored creation. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. Not on a priest's forehead, on everyone's. 3 coverings, 3 foreheads, Adam's sweat, the priest's gold plate, and God's name, written permanently on all his people. Through this lens, the Bible isn't a collection of disconnected stories. It's one continuous thread, from a garden through a temple to a new creation. From animal skins to priestly garments to the very name of God. Each step a little closer to what was always intended. The king who became a beast, clothed, marked, and step by step restored. This is what happens when you read the Bible the way its original audience would have read it, not as isolated chapters, but as one unfolding story where every detail connects. A fig leaf rejected, an animal skin provided, a gold plate engraved, a name written forever, and we're only in chapter 3 of Genesis. We're just getting started.